Hi guys, this is Tony Leonard, sitting in for this Saturday afternoon, 4 to 6 on ZBrush Live. I wanted to continue in stream on a few good things that we were picking up from last stream. I just wanted to give it a second and see if everything's connected and everybody can hear me. Please do give me a shout out in the chat and let me know if you can hear me all right, if music's not too intrusive or anything like that, and then we'll get started. So, picture good, audio good, do let me know. Good afternoon. Alright, so this week I have some interesting stuff to share with you guys. And so I figure let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So let's see here. Gonna do that so you guys can see me. And we'll do, whoops, sorry. Still getting the hang of this OBS thing. Alright. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today and spend a little bit of time to explain is I have been experimenting with Fusion 360. Which is an Autodesk application, and how I could integrate it into my workflow with ZBrush, especially from. Well, I hope you had a few good drinks at the pub. So awesome. Cool, awesome. Learning is what it's all about. Even I am learning as sometimes I stream with you guys. In fact, I'm very new to Fusion, so I'm going to try to take a little bit more of a modest stance than usual, but because quite simply there's some interesting things to do and some basics. But when can you get a free trial of ZBrush? I'm not sure. I believe there is a trial version of ZBrush Current that you could probably try out from the ZBrush store or as downloadable content, but as far as the licensing, I can't really answer for that one. Hey Danny, what's up? So yeah, Fusion. So Fusion, I guess I'm known, and probably I carry no shame in being sort of a person who's bent towards hard surface design, and so in that I'm always trying to look for workflows for myself to sort of better some ideas and shape language that I use. But I wanted to be also able to make up new, more complex parts and see how something like Fusion can integrate with ZBrush. Because sometimes you have to be a jack of all trades, and therefore you're going to use ZBrush along with another modeling package. So interestingly enough, Fusion is, for those that don't know, or more novice users, Fusion 360 is a more CAD-oriented program. But, however, in its workflow, it's very easy to make a lot of nice bevels, chamfers, and sort of like rounded bevel edges in its workflow. So I wanted to kind of take you through that, but I also wanted to recover some steps that we went over before. If you remember, I did some mech legs a couple of streams ago, and in that I used Booleans inside of ZBrush. So today I wanted to actually take something and block out a shape in ZBrush. This is one that I made last night in the late hours before I turned in, just trying to experiment, but let me show you the result. The resulting mesh, that might be a good idea. This has been smoothed a little bit and cleaned up, because a lot of times what Fusion will, Fusion fillets, fillets and chamfers are a big part of Fusion. And being able to push and extrude geometry through, and it really becomes sort of like a vehicle in which you can sort of toy through shapes, and discover some of your own shape language, right? So this here, and I'm going to turn on the polyframes, and besides the fill, I'll turn on the line. This is generally the sort of thing that I would get out of Fusion, right? And when I exported it as an OBJ, all of those fillets and chamfers, holes, cutaway sections by way of extrudes. They came in very nicely, and then a lot of the faces will be something like what you would expect from Decimation Master, but with a little bit more order. Like it's actually interpolating a lot of these bevels and chamfers and closing them off with a lot of tries versus quads, right? Luckily, when I saved out the OBJ, it didn't really produce any holes, but sometimes, depending on the complexity of the shape, you can get some unwanted holes from faces that don't display right. But generally, there's a few workarounds in which you can do to sort of like fill the hole and then close it. So when I get a piece like this, which is non-subdivided geometry, right? Because if I subdivided it, it would turn into a hot mess, just like this. On my keyboard, I'm going to hit D, just for the dynamic subdivision, and, oops, actually, sorry, changed my color. D on the keyboard, and if you looked at it, anything, subdivided, it looks very, very wrong, right? So really, this isn't meant to subdivide the geometry. It's more so, I'm taking non-subdivided geometry, so I'm just going to hit Shift D. And sometimes, due to the order of things, you might get a little bit of what's called faceting in between some of the faces, like these complex faces here that make up tries and whatnot. Maybe about an hour just to make one part, but I mean, I'm moving very slow because I'm still learning Fusion a little bit. I've only been taking a little less than a week to mess around with it, and I've never really touched it. But a lot of friends have, guys like Kirill Chipazenko, or I have a buddy Jerry Perkins, who's the Boolean king. He would take something and just chop it up in Fusion, and before you know it, you have like an excellent shape. But it's very accessible. You could jump into it pretty well. Yeah. Jerry's cool. He's a beast. So anyway, something like this, what I've done is quite simply just taken the object and brought it in as an OBJ. All of the faces were closed, and then what I did was under Polygroups, I assigned the groups by way of grouping by normal, right? So I'm going to put the loop on it, groups by normals, which takes the normal direction of all of the faces and assigns new polygroups to them. So that's why I get a lot of nice differentiating polygroups based on the planar surface and planar change, right? So flip this around, and I just sort of took some shapes, did a couple of sketches, what are called sketches inside of Fusion, and bore them straight out. And a lot of this workflow is very similar to how you might even do Booleans inside of ZBrush, but it does a lot of very complex Booleans, like some of these fillets along the edges, very easily and very quickly, and so I wanted to block out a shape and then bring it into ZBrush. So in turn, after I got the polygroups, the advantage to this is that I'm going to dynamesh this, and then I'm going to do a few things to sort of unkink some of the roughness of it, especially the faceting, and then I will show you how it turned out. So a lot of these I would probably dynamesh before moving on, and the cool thing is I've been testing it. I don't know if anybody have noticed this, but inside of the Z plugins, Decimation Master has gone through a few new changes, and I believe these are new changes, but under the presets, these presets are really awesome if you guys haven't tried them. You can crunch stuff like this down really nicely, especially if you're coming out of something having used Dynamesh and you want to get it back or make it lighter. But you could also use ZRemesher. ZRemesher's algorithm is really improved a lot, and so there's some really cool stuff that you can do. So just moving along, I'm going to click on this subtool here, which is just a duplicate, except in this case I made a duplicate using Dynamesh at a very high resolution, so like about 880. I'm sure there are those that would go higher, but due to the spec of my machine, I didn't want to make it too high, and I got enough clarity out of this, especially around the edges, right? But one of the things that I did to this to sort of get it a little bit smoother and sort of knock down what I like to call the absolute sharpness of a shape. Usually when you look at a metal shape, right, a metal shape is never absolutely sharp on each edge, right? Unless it was molded that way, or maybe perhaps it hadn't been filed down or smoothed. But maybe the mold on its corners is maybe somewhat soft. So in turn, what I do is I make a duplicate of the object. And then I take it and go into the deformations after I turn it into Dynamesh mode at about a resolution of 880. And if you even look at my setup for Dynamesh, it's just project, no polish, no groups, 0 blur, 880 with Dynamesh turned on, which did a lot of good, holding of a lot of the details. And then quite simply what I would do is I would do a little smooth and small increments, like maybe 10, run that twice, and then relax in and around about the same. So about 8 to 6 along the slider, just to relax the mesh enough to sort of unkink some of these faceted areas, where there might be like a ring or an inset geometry piece at an angle, and then the normal angle created some faceting. A lot of these types of things, you could always just take a smooth brush and sort of smooth it out a little bit, and then all traces of that faceting in the face is going to disappear gradually, right? And of course, with the smoothing algorithm, as you use it, especially along the faces, this has been in ZBrush for a while, but you can hold shift, and then if you're smoothing and you let up, it actually holds the algorithm, I think. Or maybe there's like a separate algorithm, I believe is what it was, which just has like a nicer sort of middle smooth to things. So I'll just come in and smooth out just a few touches, maybe a few edges, right? And then if I look at it, Shift F, all of the polygroups are held, looks nice and smooth. So I could take something like this and of course decimate it. So let's just for test's sake, because there's an additional step that I wanted to do this. Usually a lot of people, a lot of designers I see using stuff like Fusion, they want to use it for something like kitbashing, where you can create a set of your own visual language added pieces and then collect those into something like an insert multi-bash brush, which was about what I was going to get into just very briefly. If no one has ever made one or new to ZBrush, here's a pretty quick chance to see how to build a piece and then bring it into ZBrush and continue to make it something like an insert mesh. So like the triangulated mesh that I showed you before, you could feasibly make a kitbash set with a geometry still like this. Or if you wanted to smooth it out and use it as an exact piece like I was going to try to do, this is just a Dynamesh piece, and what I was going to do is go ahead and just I'll freeze borders and maybe do a pre-process current. And what this will do is allow ZBrush to analyze the mesh so that we can set values later here under the percentage of decimation and cut down on some of the faces. In this case, I'm going to pre-process it as a matter of process, and then I'm just going to use one of the presets to knock it down pretty hard. And then we can do this. If it's not enough, I could even maybe, I'm going to start with 35, and then I'll go to 20 and see how it does. Reordering, writing file to disk. There we go. Okay, so I've done the pre-process, and now I'm just going to hit one of the presets, and I'm going to go with 35K, right? And boom, presto, there you go. So all of the areas that have a lot of high detail, like from an edge, you notice where it looks like it has a lot of pinching or smooth faces, there's a lot higher frequency, especially here on the cylinder cut. that goes through the hole there. A lot of these details are going to be higher, but a lot of the flat planar faces are probably going to have fewer triangles to deal with, right? And so feasibly, I guess, you know, I could take this and look at it without the wireframe and polyframes, and it looks like it held the detail pretty well, right? Oh, was there a question? I think Zoomers, you had a question. By all means, do ask. I have a large square object and I made a large hole in the middle, and I'm using Dynamesh. When I re-Dynamesh it, it fills the hole. How can I prevent it from hole? Okay, so that's actually features like that have been around in ZBrush for about a minute. It's not new to 2018, but you could do like a negative Dynamesh, and I think I know what you mean. So here, give me just a second here, because I'm going to switch gears, I guess. Let's go. Whoops. Let's go to a cube. And I'll make Polymesh 3D, and I could initialize this as a cube. And if I wanted to, I can grab the gizmo and scale it up a little bit bigger. So your question is, you want to take an object and fill a hole in it, but the object, like a cube, is actually a Dynamesh, right? So I'm going to do this, and let's just save for giggles. I'm going to do a little tighten up on the loops. So I'm going to do an insert here, just so I can hold some edges, but get like sort of a softness. And we'll just build up a cube really quick. I suppose you could just crease the edges and then subdivide or what have you, but I'm just going to do it this way really quick. Oops. And down here. Oop. Right? Okay. So that looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and just apply some subdivision. We'll do 5, which will actually be 6, apply, and then I'm going to delete the lower, and that gives me plenty of faces. So you then wanted to try to take a circle, right, and cut it out. So one of the ways that I would do this is, if this was Dynamesh, let's say, which will be 224, I'll polish it, no blur, project it, Dynamesh it, right? So there we go, okay? And then I could probably use something like an insert and take a circle, and I'll turn off symmetry and I'll just draw a big object, right? Now this is not dead center, but what I could do is split mask points, and then I will come over and just unify this so I can get it dead center, right? Because I didn't draw it dead center. So I'll unify it, and I'll scale it, and if I turn on transparency, I can get a shape that will totally cut right through it, right? So now what the thing that I need to do is I need to smooth this out. So because if I take it out and if I Dynamesh it and I take it out, it'll have these actual rough faces or facets in the actual model. So I'm going to do something like Q, Shift D, B, Z, and I'll hit the ZModeler, and on this object I'll view the polyframes, and I'll just do like a quick crease just to hold the edges, and that's edge loop complete crease, right? And then for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a dynamic subdivision, and then I'm going to apply it, delete the lower, and probably Dynamesh this, right? Well, it's actually already Dynamesh because I drew on a Dynamesh piece. It then in turn made that piece Dynamesh, right? And usually inserts only work with objects that only have like a singular level of subdivision. It doesn't work with multiple subdivisions, right? So now what I wanted to do is, if I was to do a Boolean really quick, the fastest way, it used to be that you could take one object and then the other, and I would place maybe this one at the bottom, and I would make this one a negative, and then you would merge down and then re-dynamesh, and this would cut this out, right? But now that we have Booleans, that's not really necessary anymore. So you could actually make this box what's called a start group using Booleans. And on your render tab, what you want to do is, click on live Boolean. In this way, I'll turn off transparency, and I'll turn off the frames. And now, as you see, it's displaying the Boolean live, and it's made a nice hole through it, right? So, like, kind of on this premise, we're going to be doing some of that in order on some shapes that I bring out of Fusion, right? So if you wanted to actually learn how to make some holes, and if you took this object and you hit the W key or E key for scaling or R for rotate, you could then use the Gizmo world space widget and move this object, right? So let's say if I only wanted a hole that goes halfway through, then I could give it some shaping in here, right? And adversely, if you take the live Boolean off and then maybe do like a dynamic solo, you can do some more interesting design things. Here, let me turn off the floor. If I had gone back, in fact, let's say if I went back. Here we go. If I go back to the geometry the way it was when it was before I subdivided it and then dynameshed it, I mean, it's already a dynamesh, but what I could do is use the ZModeler tool. So B bringing up the brush menu, Z for ZModeler, click it, and I could go on this loop, and I'll do some things like bevel, just with a single row and an edge loop complete, and I can bevel this off. Look at it in polyframe, take this, crease it, right? And then add dynamic subdivision. Take it and, apply it, come back up, take dynamic solo off, raise this back up just a little bit for view, and now again, because this is still set up, I can just hit live Boolean again and I can see how it comes out, and that way you can see where you get like a nice nice sort of transition on the inside, right? And so you could literally, if you think about your geometry right, you could sort of think in a manner that is sort of like positive negative and just take the shape out. Does that answer your question, Zoomers? Hide PT and delete hidden. Yeah. Sure, Danny, I will take a look. In stream, I'll probably answer you back. But hit me up, yeah, man. I think you and I are connected on Facebook, so you can always hit me up and just send me something or message me through ZBrush Central. Is there a way to do this with just masking the part you want to delete it, then deleting that area and dynameshing? Actually, you know what? Quite literally, here, let's try this. If I go back, or actually, you know what? Rather than that, let's not go back. Let's just say, for example, so we got the hole, but we also got like a designed cylinder cut as a Boolean in here, and that's just a simple Boolean. Okay, so let's try appending one more square or cube. And I'll add a cube, get it, again, initialize it, and oops, quick save. You guys all have to excuse me, my voice is a little off today. I think my kids gave me a cold, unfortunately, and My voice is a little nasal today. But okay, so I'm going to do dynamic solo. And I'm going to just use the widget to scale this up a little larger. I don't know why cubes are always tiny for some reason. But I always have to use deformers to like pull it up, scale it up. So looking at polyframes, it's just a 4x4 cube, I think is what I have my initialize set to for cubes. But here's one interesting thing is if you are familiar with the ZModeler brush, there is a function in here that I could literally do this. You could do what's called a split, and that works from the vertice. So like you would probably need to have symmetry on in a way where you do your symmetry on the y-axis going y up. So let's see here. Yep, right there. And then we could just take this and do a split, and the split will actually turn it into a circle. All right. And then you could probably just take and do a Q mesh with a single poly, and holding Alt, just click all of these faces. And if you keep pushing, depending on the step, it will actually clear it all the way through it, right? So that doesn't even require a Boolean so much as just like, you know, yeah, yeah, I'm a little sick. I'm sorry. I have a cold today. I like had to take some Claritin, and it was so bad today. I don't know. Kids, schools. When your kids are in school, they catch colds all the time. Come out like a bacterial warrior, right? So anyway, if I subdivided this, it would, you know, ZBrush is nice enough to, a lot of times when you do maneuvers like this, and you're working with low poly stuff and you're doing blockouts, when you make a changes to faces a lot of times, or bevels, it will actually add in a crease. So there's actually a crease in here. So if I went ahead and just creased the rest of the box, and remember with creasing, some cool effects that you could do with creasing is, let's say if I said edge loop complete and I went around the edge and just tightened up these corners, right? Actually, don't want to get, here I'll just use single edge because I don't want it going beyond the actual dimensional corners of the cube. But one thing that I discovered that was kind of neat, I don't know, maybe everybody knew this and I was just foolish about it, but if you have a cube and you crease the edges, right, or anything really with creasing, if you use the crease menu, you can actually drop the sharpness a little bit, and this can actually change on the fly when you're using dynamic subdivision. So like if you hit D and you use some dynamic subdiv and you look at everything, okay, well, you know, it probably needs a few more levels. You could bump this up, say 5. So that's absolutely smooth, right? But it's really, really sharp. And if you actually applied this, you'd probably have to go into deform and actually maybe relax it a little bit, you know, or do something. But you can actually crease it to lower settings. Like say if I made this 50 and I made this 2, and you crease it, you can see how it would be softer. But then if you look at the well, this is an actual subdivided view, but every time you do it and you change it, it will actually change the values and show a different preview. But you gotta hit Shift D and come out of dynamic subdiv and then change it. So like maybe 60. If I did 3 and then hit D, so maybe that would be less. So you could change your values and look at it with different tightness. So instead of having to smooth it afterwards, you could actually get it that way. Yeah, it's like a tolerance, exactly. Right? And then you could just apply it, and if you were to work from this as like a base shape, I would go ahead and start, you know, just creating extra geometry, especially with inserts, and just do Booleans. And before you know it, if you are modeling in an order where you're thinking sort of in a positive negative way, you could probably get some really interesting form language by sectionalizing and cutting out modular pieces out of the geometry, right? So it's basically like when you draw something, even when you draw something in 2D, you probably try to figure out the volume of something by sketching in perspective and then giving impressions of bits that are cut out of it, like extra geometry. And if you think in this way, you can very much improve your form language, I think. So, okay, so on to this. So I'm going to show you guys this. This is just a simple piece that I was building out yesterday. And yeah, Fusion is awesome. It is some cool stuff. And you can do some actually more interesting things here, and then take those parts and designs into ZBrush and improve upon them, which is great, because I always love tools that can give ZBrush an extra push and maybe come up with something a little unorthodox or eye-catching. So complex Booleans that are easy to make in just a few minutes. I think I just started this one this afternoon and used some quick symmetry tools to just block out the parts, and then selecting the actual individual edges. I can do a lot of fillets and chamfering. So like, say for example, these are both, these are actually mirrored shapes and a body as a whole. So if you look at these selections over here, it's basically the breakdown of the document and the various bodies that make up the different pieces of this, right? And what's really great about this is you can sketch on it. So you can sketch pin shapes. So let's see. I will try to create a shape, and we'll see if we can take it out. So I'm going to do this. I've selected to sketch a square shape, and what it's asking me now is which axes I want to actually draw it out on. So this yellow, what I would suppose would be just the bottom floor axis. I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to actually hit Alt and Shift. And so bear with me, because actually, as I said, I'm still pretty new with Fusion, so I've actually only been using it for about like seriously less than a week. But I figured it out enough to make a few things with it. So I'm going to make a shape here, and then I'm just going to stop the sketch, and I'm actually going to flip it around. Okay, so that's sitting on the floor. It's got some interesting, if you're used to ZBrush's navigation, or even used to Maya's navigation, it's got some interesting navigation as far as rotating, panning, and toggling. It's actually Alt-Shift, and I believe it's the right mouse button for zoom, and also to pan, you can use the middle mouse button, Alt and Shift, and to move it around and rotate, it would be Alt-Shift and just clicking and dragging with the left mouse. And if you need to reset your view, you can always come up here to Home, and you can also choose which view, along the Y, Z, or X, front, top, bottom, and so forth. So I just sketched out a small plane, of which I'm going to see if I can bring it over and cut it out of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a body and shape it before I actually overlap it, because I need to shape it to actually mirror it onto the other side of it. Yeah, the navigation. Yeah, especially something like Max. Like, I find Max confusing as far as navigation. Like it might be. I know that you can set it to be like Maya, and when I have dabbled in Max, that's how I set it. But it's always hard from app to app to refigure out the navigation sometimes. So anyway, okay, so I'm going to take this, and actually I'm going to hit E and come up with a thickness. So as you can see here, there's a little toggle, which an arrow that will allow me to add thickness. And because this is a CAD based, in very technical application, it's very simple, very robust, but there are some technical aspects to it, like some that I haven't even figured out about, curves and whatnot. But you can actually set the millimeter size, and this is sort of an app that, because it's CAD, it will also do like some rapid prototyping. Like you can make things with it as far as 3D printing. It exports STLs and so forth. So I believe a lot of people in film are using this to fabricate or quickly prototype a lot of things like props, specific, very technical designed pieces, like prop pieces. So I'm just going to take this and give it a little bit of thickness, and then I'm going to hit enter, and then I want to come into the shape a little closer, and I just want to get some of the edges really quick. This is the hard part. For some reason with this app, it's not like Maya where you could just like get specific edges and then turn it, or select like a row of edges. You actually have to get them individually. So I'm gonna hit shift and just go around the object. There we go. And then I'm gonna click on home and get it back. There we go. And so now if I hit S, I believe I can do fillet. It has a search field here, and if you just hit F you can find fillet, but you can do a fillet and it will give me again this little arrow here, and I can just toggle it and get some round piece. I'll hit enter, which will be okay, and then I'll go to my top view and I'm just going to select the piece. Sorry, my mouse is being a little weird these days. There we go. And then I'm going to right click and do a move on it, and while I have the whole body selected, I'm just going to move it into place. You can click edges through faces. So you don't have to rotate. That's interesting to know. Yeah, I've been scouring the web, doing a lot of like little study of different like stuff with YouTube and whatnot, and looking at how to get it all going. So I'll just angle it. Oops. For some reason I think it misgrabbed it. Sorry about that. Grab this. Let's move it again. Get it right about there. And I think that should be okay. I wonder if it's actually through the bottom. Yeah, it's closer to the bottom, so I'll probably have to select it. It should be this piece here, and I'll right click, move, and I'll move it up closer because I'm going to actually cut it out of the upper part. There we go. And then I'll select it again, and this time hit S again and do mirror. Yeah. That's good stuff. Alright, so I have the body and I have it selected, I believe, and then I have to select the plane to mirror it on, which I believe should be here. And you can see it gives me a ghost of it, and then I just hit OK, and so now I have both planes, right? So I should be able to now either combine these two or take them out. So I'm actually going to see if I can do a combine on these two pieces. There we go. Join. Okay. So now, there we go. And let's see if I can move it into place. Just have it go through just a bit. Right? So that geometry intersects a bit. And then I'm going to say OK. Grab these two pieces. Let me see if I can actually remove them out somehow. Or, you know, I suppose I could extrude them. Either out or in. Here we go. And then get in close. Yeah, there's a lot of good ones. I believe the Learn Squared guys have done some streams that are really good on Fusion. Kirill Chipazenko and I think a few other artists have courses that they offer personally. I think via Gumroad, and I think you can find. There's a lot of good material, even some that is not content that you have to pay for, but the information, if you seek it, it is out there. So I'm going to turn this, and I'm going to right click on the edges, and I'll do something like, let's keep it consistent. I'll do a chamfer. So just a simple chamfer. And I can set an actual size, but I'm just going to eyeball it a little bit. If I click one tick, I could actually come in here and change this number, so like maybe 0.5 millimeters. And we can get a nice short one consistent with the same measurement that was used here. And so that's basically how I could build up shapes and just keep cutting out shapes, right? So now what I want to do is actually take all of this, and I believe it's a right click, or bear with me now, still new with this one. I believe just create or modify under the mesh menu. There should be a mesh menu. Oh, that's right. You gotta create a base feature, I believe it was, and then under mesh you create a B-rep to mesh, which I believe is sort of a new feature somehow. But if you did this, you could actually see what the geometry is going to come out to. So in this B-rep to mesh, I actually have the preview mesh clicked on. So now what I want to do is actually, I could change sort of the surface deviation, which would actually give me more faces. Yeah, getting ready to export it. So you need to follow those steps to probably get it out to something that you can use like in OBJ. So if I hit OK, that is the made shape, and then I believe you could right click on this, or like select it. My mouse is being super chuggy today, I don't know why. Here we go. I thought there was an export there. I think you can, where was it? The low settings are actually very good. Yeah, they crunch down stuff pretty well every time that I've used it, and amazingly I've never gotten like anything weird like let me see, let me finish the base feature there, and should be able to save as OBJ. There we go. And then with that, you can save it to wherever you want. So I'm just going to save it as TL ZB Live. KB. So I'll save that as a third piece because I've been making a few pieces, and I'll save it, and then I'll hop back over to ZBrush. Right? And so now that I'm in ZBrush, one of the ways that I'm going to pull that in is I'm just going to use some simple geometry like a star, right? And you can look at it on its floor. So knowing that this blue is going to be on the Z forward, red is going to be on the X, and green on the Y. I'm just going to go in and import on the tool palette. Come up here, and there we go. Find the file, the OBJ file, and it brings it in. Oh, that's right. I only selected half of it, so, but that's okay because since they were equal parts, and I actually made them as two different parts, we're missing half the geometry, but we can get it back. So I'm just going to take the gizmo. Oh, give it 1 second to save. Oh, give me 1 second, folks. Excuse me, guys. Pardon me for that. But we can use our gizmo to sort of move the piece over just slightly off the center axis, right? I want it to actually get like a little bit of space. And now that it's along the X, I can just simply go in. I have actually added to my UI, but I can slide my UI over and just do a mirror and weld on it, right? And then just to get it a little bit closer, X symmetry with the gizmo, and just bring it in just a little bit tighter. So now we have like a nice flat interesting base to work with, right? And I'm going to keep this geometry. Yeah, if you array meshed it, I'm sure you could come up with some really cool stuff. But even using like simple like a shape like this, I could always use as like a skeletal link, you know, like if you had parts that intersected. I mean, probably designed in a shape a little bit better, but you could do stuff like that. You could do anything with it. So for the most part, I want to take something like this and turn it into language that I can use in a kitbash, because as a kitbash piece, using something like Fusion, I can get some really quick, interesting shapes, bring them in here, plot them in, and I could crunch them down, keeping some of a lot of the shapes, and just using it as a straight up insert. But it's not just the insert for the detail or the part necessarily, but I could actually use it against another object. So because you can use a lot of insert materials with negative booleans, you could actually take this shape and put it along a surface that you can then create surface noise with, right? Because if they intersect and then you turn on booleans or live booleans, it'll take an impression. Yes, it's a lot faster. So there's a multi-purpose behind it all. So I'm just going to turn off the polyframes and look at it. The parts look clean. But again, something like this, we can't really subdivide it, because if we use subdivision, this is what happens and it looks like poop, right? So we're not gonna subdivide it per se. I am, however, gonna hit the polygroups and wireframe, hitting Shift F. I'm gonna come over, use polygroups, and again, I'm gonna do like a polygroup by normal, right? And so for all of those hard planar changes, I'm gonna get like a different face, and I could probably even edit this a little bit more. Some of them might become useful later, so you know, sometimes they don't always connect, especially when faces are cut like this. It's not going to be a consistent edge, but I could always come in and like hide the rest of these from the top. Or actually, that didn't work well. I should have used the rectangle. There we go. Do something like this and hide the top, and then keep hiding other pieces. Like if you just click on the face. Let's see. Doesn't want to go. Doesn't want to hide. And you could narrow it down, and you could probably then group the rest of them, right? Oh man, this cold is kicking my butt. So sorry, guys. But anyway, if you narrowed it down to the edge, you could then just polygroup that edge and keep it as one, right? So I'll just make the bottom and the sides the same polygroup, just for example. But you could use these as control factors later. So you could do something like if you went to stroke and you were doing some Z remeshing or something to take advantage of that curve. You could always frame the mesh, and what it'll do is it'll frame it, and then when you turn up the tolerances on, say, ZRemesher, you can use the curve strength and crank it up to 90 to 100 and get some more reinforced shaping around the edges of an object like this. For this, I'm not actually going to do that, so I'm going to delete these. But what I was going to intend to do is go ahead and Dynamesh it. But before all of that, I still want to make cuts and edits to this. So I'm just going to take a while for a minute, and I'm going to let you guys watch me just do a few Booleans. Then afterwards, I actually had something I was going to show you guys. Sure. So let's go. I'm going to go BI and just grab some IMM primitives. And so I use these a lot these days. It's kind of funny. All of these shapes are really customizable. Q-cube, the sphere, and also the extended cylinder are a lot of the pieces that I tend to use a lot. But because this has no subdivided levels to it, I can just come in and think about shapes. I'll grab this. Right, and then it'll just be an insert that I can take and rotate. Holding shift, I'm going by 10-degree ticks. There we go. Position it. Have to dig in a little deeper. And for this, I will do a split masked points. Sorry, I had dynamic solo on, but that's basically how it is. So this tiny little detail here is what I want to take out. But I can also mirror it along the X and then move those so it looks like an opposite piece. So I'm going to use Q, and now that it's its own subtool basically, is even just a tiny bit, little bit apart. I'm going to use, sorry, excuse me. I'm going to use the mirror and weld under modify topology, and I'm going to mirror it along its front axis, right? Oops, that's not front. Sorry, that's up. My bad. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Sorry about that. Not X, Z-axis. There we go. Now, be stubborn. That's okay. I'll just duplicate it and use this to turn it around. There we go. And then I can take this guy and flip it down, lock it again, and bring those over and use it somewhere else. Maybe here. Yeah, that should be nice. Okay. And then I'll just merge these two into one subtool. Just a quick merge down. Okay, take it. And for this, I'm going to set it negatively. And, oops, actually, no, sorry. This will be the start. This has to come down. And then this will be an intersected piece. So you start to get these pieces cut out. Alien. That's a good one. That's a good one. Count Quadula. That's a nice one. So anyway, yeah, you can just start taking simple shapes out of these and keep going around the shapes, right? So I keep coming back up to the start and repeating the process. Let's say, like, for example, if I take a Q-cube, line it up. Sometimes I don't always want to line up right. Even holding shift. There, we'll do this. Get that widget to like straighten it out. Every once in a while, backed out, it sort of tilts just a little bit. So I'm just trying to get it mad straight. There we go. split masked points again, and undo. When you split masked points, every once in a while it'll make another start. So I'll undo this. And everything else is still there, but just it needs to go from the bottom of the start. So there's a little rearranging that needs to take place. And you can use the widget to sort of cut in. And you could even take and use control just like you use with the transpose, and shift. And if you hold up, you'll make another. This turned darker because there's actually a mask on the original piece, but floating out here is an actual copy of the same thing. So I'm just going to bring those over here and bring them down, and you can see the other piece here. And neatly enough, you can always rotate these, come up with some interesting shapes. Well, that might do. Lock this and bring it back. Clear the mask on it, and there you go. You have another Boolean out piece, right? You could also do this additionally. So, like if you added cylinder pieces or something like that. Sorry, need to go back to the start. I will split this. Do a dynamic solo on this, and I'll do a few things to this because this could actually be different, kind of interesting. Playing with cylinders, especially these actually have a lot of loops in it. So like if you even though without trying to reinitialize this, you can kind of set it up by just using the ZModeler brush. So that's what I use this for. Like a lot of times if I need to edit simple geo, like I come in here and just use the ZModeler and do something like a delete, and I'll just start deleting complete edge loops every other. You might want to do nothing for the faces, and also for vertex editing, set to do nothing. That way if you off click, you don't make a mistake. But I'll just start taking out a few loops and editing just from a poly editing sort of way. I'll do a bevel here, and I'll come under here and do a bevel here. And actually, I'll do a Q mesh along a poly loop. So if I wanted to, I could actually polygroup, poly loop, which very quickly would take something and do like that. So like I just wanted one band of something, and then I could hit Q mesh along the poly loop again, come in here and just push it in. And you could use your gizmo control to mask it off, maybe reshape it on the inside. Maybe make this a little shorter. And then now, in here, I might want to make a few additional changes. So I'm trying to think in a positive negative, again, just a positive negative way in which I could take some of these hard shapes and cut them out of a solid, right? Yeah. So creating a pattern, exactly. I'm going to do bevel, just one single row here, and one here. Oh, excuse me. Again, pardon me. It's just really bad nasal cold. Anyway, let's try to now crease it up so that we can keep our shapes when we subdivide it, and then it will come out nice and smooth. So I'm going to do an edge loop completed crease. So creasing here and here, and all along these beveled edges, even inside of here. get this down a little bit. Just click once, just a light tap on the edge. And those edges should hold. So if I hit D, I can see it in dynamic subdivision. Still got a little bit of banding, so I need to come over and under dynamic subdiv, just crank it up a little bit, maybe 4, which will give me 5. Not too much banding behind that. So I'll use this little cog. I think some people may not want to spend the money on a subscription, and also, you know what, actually, I'm not paying a subscription for Fusion. I actually signed up for educational, which is pretty nice. So if you are a student, know that you can get a lot of Autodesk products for learning. You know, and I've taught you know, modeling for, you know, like as an introduction to hard surface, and I do a lot of streams for educational purposes sometimes. So you know, you're not without. You can actually get your hands on it. But if you're going to use it professionally and actually use it to make money, you know, they do offer a subscription, and subscription-based modeling is not so bad, I believe. Depends on the software, I suppose, but yeah, you know, even coding guys and developers, they need to make money for their wares that we do use to make awesome visual effects. Anyway, so let's take this, and I'm going to actually turn off the start, kick it down 1 notch so that it's under that piece again. I'm going to turn off dynamic solo, and now I'm going to use this as a piece to take out of this. And it's kind of funny because I should probably scale this and move it around, maybe find an interesting spot for it to be in, because here I don't think there's going to be so much thickness in between the mesh, so I might change it here real quick. I'll just line it up, bring it over here, find a nice good place for it, and of course setting this to a negative. I can now see it how it cuts through the mesh. If I wanted to utilize only that groove on the inside, I could do that. I could even position it so it's halfway, so I get like a little bit of a step on the inside. Sort of a lip there that is happening. And for that would actually cut all the way through. Just want to raise it up just a tad. We're not going to get that middle edge, but we get this nice spot right here, right? And of course, one other interesting thing is these are all solid pieces, and we have one nice cut line here down the center. That's just basically the center of the geometry. But interestingly enough, if you wanted to do some other interesting design elements, you could take something like this. I'm going to actually turn off symmetry and use an insert of just a simple primitive Q-cube, and I'm going to make it fairly large if I can, and then I'm going to split the mast from it. Yes, sorry, turn that into a shape, turn the dynamic subdiv off, and there we go. Actually, it came out. I drew it out really big. But let's just take this one for now, and I'm going to actually kick it back up top above the group, because I just want to use its planes to do a few design things. So I'm going to turn on the polygroups, but I'm actually going to turn off very quickly so that I don't get visually confused the live Boolean, because if you show live Boolean while you're using polyframes, it usually turns out like this, and sometimes the bands that come across this as a preview mode are a little bit visually confusing. So just so that there's nothing obstructing the view, I'll just deal with it as a solid poly. So I'm going to take this and just edit the cube down to like just some flat faces really quick. So BZ, and I'll just delete this. Resistance is futile. Actually complete. Yep, I'll take that out, take that out. And so now I just want to start deleting faces, right? So I'm actually going to use faces along the X and shape those out. So I'm going to delete the other sides of the cube. So I'm just going to delete this. Oop. Quick save. This gives me a chance to drink some of it. Get so parched. So parched when I'm chatting. It's so dry. It's warm in LA. It's warmer than usual. It's craziness. It's like it went from winter and just said, you know what, we're gonna skip spring now and just save it for the, just do summer. Alright, so we're gonna delete some faces. Sorry. So I'm gonna delete that, turn it, that. Turn on dynamic solo. I'm gonna get rid of the bottom, and just to turn again, I'm pretty sure that I can delete this and this. And so now we have this direction here only, right? And if I turn dynamic solo off, I can see the rest of the pieces. And I think I can get rid of this one. So I just need one single 2D plane from the X side, right? And what I wanted to do to this is straighten it out for one. I'll just use the gizmo to do that. Just ebb it into place. It's, if you ever need to recenter this, a lot of times I'll do this. Just take this, get it, and I'm going to rotate it into place. That looks pretty flat. Great. There we go. Scale this down. Take it from here and pull this up. There we go. So that's about the thickness that I need for this, right? I'm gonna maybe get like a little length so I can cut it, but what I wanted to do was simply have one plane and the ZModeler brush to make a few divisions. And so I'm gonna, along the edge, just do like an insert, and I'll break these into a couple of sections, right? Maybe one there, one here, keeping these kind of close to each other. Do a third here, right? And I could think about the thickness later, but one of the things that I wanted to do was take and click out a mask. So I'll use the mask pen and just click and drag here. I'll drag here for now, and I'll use my gizmo again, hitting Y, and along the X, just push this and come up with a sort of designed line, right? Am I bragging? I hope I don't want to brag. My bad. So let's see. We'll take there we go. I'll drag that. I just want this vert to pull it out, so I just inverted it, hitting the canvas. Oh yeah, my gizmo's way over there. Okay, so I'll push it out, right? And this line, I want to use this as a design line, but it has no thickness. So I'm going to clear the mask, go back and hit Q. And I'm going to select all of these faces, just singularly. I could do polygroup all, it doesn't matter, same thing. But I'm going to do an extrude on it, or either you can do a Q mesh on it, either one works for what I'm doing. Just use like a quarter step, and I'm going to take it and just give it like a little bit of thickness, right about there. Right? And even if it's super thin, that's fine, but I'm going to take it and overlap it, and I'm going to move the piece into place and find a good place for it to be. Let's see. like how it goes probably from this little squared ellipse here, and maybe I can shorten it and have it go to the forward circle and just cut right through. That might be an interesting shape. With this, I could use this as a live Boolean shape, but I could also do one other thing. And this is kind of cool, but you could take such shapes, and without using Booleans per se, although I'll turn it back on so that we see the rest of our design, I'll take this and lower it. And as I lower it, I'll lower the subtool under the start again. If I take it out, hide polygroups, I can actually design in some cut lines, right? One other way to do this, if it's not in the start group, like let's say, for example, you made a Boolean from everything already. In fact, let's try it that way. Just this design line alone. I'm going to put that aside, actually maybe hide it for a second. So we just have this flat piece, and I want to use this as a base. So with all of the pieces that I have so far, I'm just going to take and create a Boolean from it. So make Boolean mesh under the Boolean subtab under subtools. And what it'll do, similar to adaptive skinning, is it'll make an appendable mesh with all the Boolean operations already performed. So I'll append it and get the U mesh, which actually means union mesh, and I'll add it to my tool. That way I can actually take the rest of these and just hide them and continue working off of the space. So if you look at the actual topology here, that's how it's starting to look, right? Like it took all of the pieces, actually those smoothed out pieces, we might have to do a little bit of smoothing again, because it took the actual geometry and made it a little bit lower, but it's connecting everything and closing it, right? So there's no holes or anything like that. Boolean. So now our line. What are we going to do with it? I'm going to take it, maybe put it there, select it, move it about, right there would be cool. But you could take these and make a Boolean out of it, but when you make a Boolean, and I was going to say with something like this, you could put it through, and I believe, I'm trying to remember how I did this last time around. First I'm going to mirror and weld it so that we have it on both sides. That would probably be a good idea. So along the X, there we go. And I'll make this again a new start group and take this guy and bring it down. And I'll make that's negative, that's that, and yep, there it goes. It goes through the piece. While you have this tool selected for the line, if you're doing something like cut lines, you can always come down to the deformation. I think I showed you guys this last time around, but you can inflate it in either way and come up with even a smaller cut line division through the mesh. So you can set like sort of a special thickness, right? Then let's just, for example's sake, take this, I'm gonna do like another Boolean on it and just cut it out now, because what you need to do is you need to be able to do the Booleans now before you send it to something like KeyShot. So just again on the Boolean menu, I'm gonna make bool again. There we go. So make Boolean, and I'll append it again and hide the rest. just so that we don't destroy anything. There we go. And now, just for fun, let's see how it looks. So if I take off live booleans, and under the render tab, if I go and hit my external render in KeyShot, I can now send it to KeyShot. There we go. I'm going to cancel that for now. Oh, for some reason, KeyShot opened on my other screen. I'm sorry about that. Let me move it on over here. Okay. So this is probably pretty small. So I would probably have to definitely make it larger. But because it was actually a little bit smaller than I had wanted to. But they look very nice when you kick them someplace else. Actually, let's go back and re-export it. So I'll return or ZBrush a little bit. Let's take the whole thing and just do a transform on the size. I'll kick it up a little bit. There we go. Let's try that. Quick piece, a little bit bigger. Probably some of the geometry is a little tight, but it displays all right. And then from here, of course, you know, applying materials that you could use. I've been testing some materials that I actually got from some of the fellows over at Chaos Masons with one of their tutorials. It's really cool stuff. But you could hold like the Alt key and put it over whatever type of material that you choose. Oh, got a little bit of an error on that one. But there you go. Some nice geometry. Turns out to be a nice metal piece. But you could take something like this now and make it an insert. What have I done to the topology? Actually, absolutely nothing for this one. I left it sort of as is, which might be a little bit sloppy, and actually something like this you'd probably have to retopo it. If I made it an insert, one of the things that I like to do is probably dynamesh it, and then after I dynamesh it, I'll probably take it and decimate it, because sometimes what I want to do is clean up some of the facets in here, so that it looks like a nice smoothed out metal piece. So that's one of the steps that we could do now. If you actually wanted to take this and make it a kitbash brush, say like something like an IMM brush, and you're okay with sort of the geometry, or not, you could either take it this way, which should be fine for an insert. Go over to brush, and if you're going to be applying this piece exactly from this point of view, like I'm facing from the top down, sort of like a Y position, you can come in and just square it up, and it has to be the way that you're going to orient the brush, right? And then just make a new brush. I believe under the create menu. Let's see, create, insert mesh, new, and you can name your brush or rename it whatever you want. But now, every time you're working on something, like let's say if I go back to this here, hide these, and takes dynamic subdiv off of this. Oh, actually it has only one subdivision level, which I'll kill and delete the higher just so I can use this on it. But you should be able to now just apply this to your shape. Right? And it works just like as a regular insert. So if you wanted to do some sort of designed language, you could make a collection of these just using like simple shapes, or you can also use that for doing a negative. So let's say, for example, I wanted to give this base piece a subdivision. So smoothing it out using subdivisions, hitting dynamic, I'm going to apply it. And at level 6, it's pretty high, right? So I'm just going to delete it, delete the lower, keeping the shape. And then I want to now be able to lay this piece in. And since things are pretty interesting on the outside of this, or QMesh it, yeah, I'm going to take this and actually flip it the other way. And I'm going to split mask points so it's a different shape. So I now have the two comparison shapes. And I could turn this, pick it up and pull it upwards. Oops, sorry. There we go. Make this the start. And the same thing with this. Go back, render, and do some live Boolean on that. And literally take this shape out of the other, right? So you could work all of these shapes in the reverse and get some interesting sort of like surface design out of it, right? So they work both ways, and then you could just take and scale this, put it where you want. There you go. And if you took it out of there, you could probably mirror and weld it onto the other side, right? So these are kind of things that I've been toying with. Besides, of course, with regular objects, you can do a lot with slicing, and then taking those objects and sort of making them different pieces. Like, say, for example, if I was to take this, I'll take the Booleans off for a minute, and if I view this like so, I'm just going to take a slice curve, cut once here, and maybe once here, once here, and while I'm holding this, I'm going to actually hold Alt, which should slice it along the other direction, right? So like the shadowed edge, when you pull something out, if you actually want to go against that, you can actually hold Alt while you're still pressed down, and it'll affect the mesh in the other direction, right? So normally, if I was to hold this here, it would slice and provide polygroups for everything that is on the shadowed edge, but if you wanted to go against that, you can hold Alt, and it'll do it in the reverse, right? So now what I could do is I could just take a regular marquee, selection marquee, and start hiding some of these areas, like so. Actually, you know what? I need one more. Oops. One more slice. Just one, I promise. I'll remove these pieces here. That. So what I'm doing is I'm actually trying to just design up a shape, in which that is one polygroup. Actually, with simpler geometry, it works better with this sometimes, but let's see. You can hide it anyway. Just take that, make it one. Oops, actually no, sorry. Take that out. Yep. And I'll take that out. Now, I'm right? So that way, because you can't do really complex cuts with slices, sometimes you have to do them in parts. So, yes, I have heard of ZModeler. It's I believe they use it for like assets, like in film. Pardon me. They use it for assets in film where they need to replicate something very quickly. They use ZModeler. Actually, excuse me, gents, so that you can see all on my screen. I'm just going to take that off for a second. All right, maybe that's a little less distracting. But yeah, anyway, you can take this and hide this section, turn around, group this, and so now you have like a nice cut. And then you could probably do something like dynamesh this with groups turned on, and it'll actually literally turn into two pieces. Or you could, of course, take your widget and control click on a polygroup, and then you can do a split, which I use a lot. So I'll just split unmasked points, and it'll basically take it and make it two pieces of geometry. And then from there you can do something like a close holes on it. So like if I move this down and I click Alt, click on here, that's all in one deal. You could probably actually just do something like I was doing last week by just taking the shell, doing a group loops, which will hold the shapes in place, especially where these cuts are made. Right? So those two intersecting pieces would fit together, and then you could do a panel loop on them, which is awesome. So I'm just going to cut here, and first do a panel loop on this one. So edge loop menu, and under panel loops, just like one loop, thickness, I'm just going to go 0.35, no polish, no bevel. And the elevation, I'm going to go inward towards the mesh, so I'm going to hit minus 100. And I'm going to save this because actually I forgot one set. More than likely, to manage this a little bit better, it would probably be good after the group loop to go ahead and ZRemesh it. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to make this 2. Alright. Let's just make it 1. Turn my adaptive size up to 90. Let's see how this does, right? So it'll take a second to calculate, but it should clean up the topology a little bit. Not horrible, not bad, could be better. But for time, I think I'm just going to go with it for a second and do the panel loop that I was setting up. So I'm just going to click it. Oops. That's too big. That's too big. Let's do minus 50. Half of that. 0.25. Panel loop it. So yeah, it gave it some thickness. It's probably a little bit too wide, and the scale is down, but that kind of thickness is what it is. But if you, scaling aside, if you give it a panel loop through there, you can probably kick it back and make it a little bit smaller. But you could pair up the two pieces, and then just use like a clip curve to get it segmented together, or you could close holes on it and then dynamesh it, I think, and then you could probably just sharpen it up a little bit using the clip curve, and then just put the two parts together. But it's kind of an easy way to just like cut two slices and put them together, right? Or yeah, Alt ZRemesh would probably give you like that other algorithm, right, Danny? All right. Actually, let's see if we can go even a little bit lower. Let's undo that now. So I think actually what I want is 0.025 maybe. Let's try that. An elevation of 50, same setting. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's decent. So I just needed like a little shell because no one's gonna see the inside of this, right? Yeah. as my buddy Jerry says. Yeah. Take it to the same thing with this one. ZBrush. I'll do 2. And 90 adaptive. And then same. Oh. My biggest thing is when I'm working like this, if it's calculating something, don't touch it. Don't ever touch it. Anyway, let it do its thing and finish. Polish 5 to 0, 0, 1, and we'll panel it the same way. So these two edges here, so the topple is a little funky. It's not going to hold, but I mean, you get the idea. It's basically with a little finagling, you can usually keep these to shape. Yeah. Yes. Never click anything. You're like, if a mesh is heavy, let's be fair. If a mesh is heavy, or if there's a process that takes a long time, sometimes you can hang up the app by prematurely clicking somewhere in the viewport, getting antsy, and it will make it chew on something a little bit longer than it should. But if you leave it alone, don't touch it, it should be fine. Yeah. But anyway, so as I move through these, I could probably just take and subdivide this and and pair the plates together and clean up these edges, right? So if I alt click on this one, I can always fix some of these shapes. I'll use dynamic. Take this, maybe, did I mesh it? I know it kind of is defeatist to maybe go back, but you could, or subdivide it. Subdivision works. And then you could go back and take your clip curve, sort of get in there manually, maybe even make a bigger cut that is nice and sharp. Because, I mean, essentially, I mean, we've talked about this before, but essentially what the clip curve does is it just flattens the shape. It doesn't actually cut it, per se. And so, yeah, there you go. That's a lot nicer, a lot cleaner. And you could bring this down like so. And so that's nice and sharp. Cool stuff that you can do as well is if you wanted like a little design edge. I'm going to turn on X. Go back to X, not Y. There we go. And I'm going to make like a little mask here. See if I can do this. Bring that back. And if I'm turning this slightly at an angle, and I use the clip curve brush, I can add some little details, kind of like so. I don't want to go too deep into the mesh, but you can make a nice little cut and sometimes come up with, like, you know, just a little bevel on there. And then I would smooth some of this out because it's nice and subdivided. But you could do stuff like that, like turn it at an angle and cut it and get like a different design shape. But fits pretty nice. So let's see here. I want to make this fit. So yeah, every once in a while, like I believe also if you use the transpose tools, this is kind of an old one, but I think you can drag out a transpose. If you turn it, you can actually orient the transpose to the camera angle sometimes as well. I have to go back and brush up on my Z docs for that one, but I believe it orients along the camera angle, so or orients the transpose along the camera angle. So if you want to turn it at a weird angle and then start chopping with either a slice tool or even a trim brush would work. you could probably do something like that. So what I want to do is I want to see if I can finagle these two shapes together. Right? Lots of finagling today. So let's see. I'm going to make a mask here. Mask here. And I'm going to push it to the Z forward. Hit W to move it. There we go. I'm going to pull this up. There we go. And then I'm going to mask all of this right there at the half. Pair that together. Nope. That's why I had it masked. There we go. So just kind of. Oh, that's not going to work. I was trying to see if I could push it over, but it's being a little funky. I should probably divide it. Dividing would be better. True. Oh, that was off just by a tad there. Let's see if I can catch the same angle. There we go. So that's better. You could, in theory, you would take this and blur it out a little bit. That's a ticket. Hey. Is that a Dynamesh? But if not, we could make it one. There we go. And I'm using the spacebar to move this around. Just clip it right there. Kind of lost some subdivision, I think, when I re-dynameshed it. It got a little nasty, but I would probably have to cut this a little bit better and mess with it to get it like nice and clean. But we could always pair it together, or use some simpler geo and start just taking it apart at the shape, and then just use like ZModeler to bridge it. But a lot of times I do tricks like that where I slice it, but I don't do slicing so much like this anymore. I probably just make the square because of actual areas like this that become problematic. That's where I would make those planes and then just cut a design shape which would be a lot cleaner, and just stick it through, Boolean it, and then turn it into you could clip curve it. Yes, you could clip curve it, and that's actually what I was doing at the start here. One piece came out a little bit cleaner, but some of the geo here got a little futzed, so I'd have to fix it, and then I Dynameshed it, which made it worse. But it would probably, let's go back. Actually, let's go back. There we go. So something like this, where I had two pieces, but I don't think that I had the thickness on the inside. This is one of the reasons why I like Booleans just now a lot more, is because it's much easier to do this without having to mess with geometry too much. It's a simple, quick way, and it will literally turn things into two different pieces. So in other words, instead of having to use the clip curve, which, believe me, the clip curve still has its uses, especially when blocking out like concept meshes. But now for something like this, if you wanted a complex cut or shape, the Boolean system is so much more faster using ZBrush. Is there any special questions that I can answer? I was going to actually take the last half hour to show you guys something else that I've been dealing with. It's a really cool little Mac that I designed, but I wanted to open it up and show you guys the project because I'm probably going to be building on more to it and sometime over the course of the week, I'm actually going to try to record it, but I can't make any promises. Every time I make promises to record some stuff, I end up forgetting to do it, or it gets too noisy to do it. But let me show you. So before I move on, anybody want to ask any lasting questions? So I think I gave you guys sort of a rundown of doing a few Booleans, and I used also as a source, I used Fusion to design a piece, which, as you can see, you can totally take it into something like KeyShot and start rendering it up, and they look very nice. Like if you let it sit for a while, get a nice good render, or if you have Fusion made pieces that are in multiple parts, you can always piece them together. Maybe excuse me, using a couple of other pieces to do negative inserting Booleans on the surface. Inserts also will cut into some of these pieces, so you could use something like that and then just do a new Boolean. So just with a basic sort of like template shape, you can get a lot out of it, right? Especially when it comes down to rendering. So it's just something I wanted to show you guys for this week. But let's go into some recent stuff here. I had this for you guys. There we go. Open. No. Well, yes. Let's shoot it. What is this weekend? 4/14/2018. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to open this up. It's going to take a second. It's got a lot of parts to it. Yeah, every tool. Boy, this is a big project. I should probably save the tool. Get rid of the rest of the pieces. Yep, don't touch it, because if you touch it, bad things can happen. Just let it run its course. These are perfect opportunities. So, like, if you guys wanted to ask me something, please, by all means, jump in with the questions. So here's a mech that I've been making over the course of the last week, and I thought it would be a great show. This design is actually based off of a little like real world kitbash that I made. So here, actually, let me call it the pod mech. But yeah, let's free up some of this. So this guy is a design that I'm working on. It's just like sort of like a ball section, a piloted ball section, and I'm gonna actually try to do a render in KeyShot and get it going. But a lot of the work behind here is about the same similar technique that I've been talking about in the last two streams. So if you get a chance, go back, see how I'm doing a lot of contouring. I'm borrowing a lot of techniques from Chi Vang, Marco Plouffe, Frederick Daoust, and Cedric. I believe Cedric, his last name is sort of hard for me to pronounce, but I believe it's Seyhu. Seyha? Siat? I'm not sure. If Marco's watching, you have to forgive me for butchering your name. I'm sorry. But they have some really awesome stuff. If you go back through some of their posts and interviews, some on ZBC and some on ArtStation as well, they had some really cool stuff as far as like contouring and how to build up some shapes. So this is something that I'm using a lot of my own kitbash pieces, maybe a few others, like just in very minimal regard. And then I put it together, and after I put it together, I'm just mocking this up, and then I'm taking the pieces and breaking them into individual subtools, right? Some are built actually by using the ZModeler, and then I'm also using like I forgot what the workflow is actually discussed, but sometimes you can take geometry and create like sort of a polygroup, and then do an insert inside that polygroup, and then clicking and dragging off on the canvas, almost like Dynamesh, it'll fuse it, and sort of fuse the mesh together. So, not to be confused with Mesh Fusion. I think it's actually something different. But been testing some methods that way. So just like the little insert detail here, if I was to look at it, so you can see here where it's triangulated a little bit, that's the actual insert, and the rest is just ZModeler. And some of these other sections were retopoed and then subdivided by using the ZRemesher, and then by the same method added a thickness with panel looping, and then once I subdivided it, I added in some details. So next time when I have a little bit more time, I think I have 10 minutes left, and due to my cold, I think I'm going to take off just a few minutes early, if you guys can forgive me. But yeah, this is something I'm going to save and store for next stream. So I'm going to take this and do a little bit of a poly painting to it, and then we're going to take it into KeyShot and do some continuing rendering on this, and then I'm going to talk about some of the painting methods that I'll employ inside of Photoshop. So do stay tuned for that, and until then, I'm probably going to, over the course of the week, be building this out a little bit more, and I'll try to post some of that progress. There's a thread that I have going on ZBrush Central where I actually need to go back and edit and make sure that some of the images from these streams are updated there. But let me dig up the URL for you guys. Let's see. Probably have to log into ZBrush Central. Yes, I do. Here we go. Oh my god, this cold is so bad. You guys, I have no idea. Don't get a cold when it gets hot. It's like the most worst thing ever. Let's see here. Sorry guys, give me just one moment. Oh my god. My mouse is like, for some reason, broken or something. Let us post. Oh no. Okay, let's go back. Here we go. Alright. So I found it, and I'm going to copy it, and I should, in the chat, paste it, but you can see it here. I need to actually fix a few of the images and whatnot, because for some reason something happened on ZBrush Live, but I'm going to be adding some extra post in here, maybe with some progress shots so that you guys can take a look. But I will, at least in the Twitch chat, I'll try to go ahead and paste it. Let's see here. 'Cause, 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 here for you guys. So do stay tuned, and thanks for joining me today. You guys have a good weekend. Hope everybody is well. Namaste. Thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks for joining me in this stream. Alright, so do stay tuned, guys. If you have any additional questions, of course, you're more than welcome to hit me up. If you don't find me on Twitch while I'm streaming here, you can always find me on ZBrush Central. I go by the moniker Koro. That's Koro. And if you follow the link there, you can always probably just add me, I think, in ZBrush Central. But do stay tuned, as I'm still trying to hack through a few things, but I'll try to add some extra content to things that are going on and maybe do some breakdowns and whatnot. Thank you. Thanks, Danny. I will. I'm going to actually probably go take a nap. But cheers. Thank you very much. All right, you guys have a good weekend. Thanks for joining me. Thanks again to Pixelogic for hosting these live streams. And have a good one. Cheers.